There were 4 thematic areas addressing gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. Thematic area 2, women economic empowerment programs, women peer education program, and women's political participation and leadership. You had already seen the results. And meet the organization that have worked in Enugu State in partnership with Action Aid Nigeria, funded by Global Affairs Canada over the past 5 years. The lead organizations are Webi, Winet, and Wako. And then the community organizations, there are 12 of them. I think this thing is not showing all of them. But these are the community-based organizations that were part of the project. Next slide. The organizations benefited from tailored capacity building actions, trainings, technical support, mentoring and coaching, supervisory monitoring, so that they will build the organizations and have their capacity built. Next slide, please. There were several strategies used: media advocacy, skills and financial learning, literacy, formation and support of cooperatives, peer education, community sensitization and mobilization. Next slide. Then the results and achievements across intervention thematic areas. The reach, I think Niri, will also touch some of this, but overall indirect reach, we have 1,367,012. And for the overall direct, we have over 500. I don't know why the slides are not coming up fine. Next slide. Under thematic area 1, addressing gender-based violence and violence against women and girls, 567,102 persons were reached with information on Enugu State Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law. That's the VAP law. 30 out of court cases were resolved. That's the work of WACOL, and then 567,988 people or survivors benefited from legal and psychosocial service. Next slide, please. Under thematic area 2, economic empowerment, 709 women received grants and startup materials for businesses. And 1,873 women were trained in income generating skills. Next slide. Under thematic area 3, women's peer education program, it was already mentioned in one of the documentaries that the age-long practice of female genital mutilation / cutting was abolished through a proclamation by the traditional ruler of Enugu community, His Royal Majesty Igwe Ignatius. Please let's give him a round of applause. He's here. Igwe, thank you for that. 6 peer women education groups in 3 communities of Ugwaji in Enugu South, Amadeo, and Uwakubo and Kano West local government areas, with 120 women are members of the peer education circle. Women peer education members now have increased awareness on issue of inclusion of women, girls and persons with disabilities in leadership and decision making. Women in Ugwaji, Amadeo, Uwakubo, they mobilize, organize, and take actions in their communities. And following reports on incidents of misbehavior by children and teenagers in Ugwe of market at night in Enugu, the Traditional Rulers Council issued a proclamation banning teenagers and children from the market from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. This is to check harassment of young girls and acts of impunity and immoral acts in the market. Next slide, please. Women's political participation and leadership. We've already seen the results. We saw the women who were included in Traditional Rulers Councils. These are the results. 469 women were sworn in as members of Traditional Council cabinets from 72 communities in Enugu State. 37 women in Town Union Executive, establishment of Women Leadership Academy by WEBI, 23 women in neighborhood watch, increasing women's involvement in decision-making on security matters. Over 700 women were trained for leadership roles both in rural and urban areas. 5 women became councillors at top level. First female president in computer science department of IMT. First female student became deputy chief judge, student senate at IMT Enugu. The commissioner of girl guides in Enugu State is a beneficiary of the Leadership Academy. The executive director of WEBI has given a chieftaincy title of that is Doctor of Light to recognize our organization's efforts. Igbo Mwai of Ndabo was coronated and 2 students became student government presidents in Enugu State College of Education Technical and Peaceland College. Next slide, please. Photos speak. Let's look through some of the photos that came out of, these activities. Next slide, please. There may be some disturbing content, so viewer discretion is advised. Next slide. This is a breastfeeding mother whose nipple was bitten off by an uncle during a heated argument, a victim of domestic violence. And the Wakol intervened, provided shelter, legal and medical support. The suspect was tried by a magistrate court and eventually convicted. Next slide, please. This is a 9-year-old that was serving as a house help and experienced domestic violence here in Enugu town. Wakol rescued her, following a complaint by a Good Samaritan and provided medical and legal support. The perpetrator couple are now convicted and doing time. Next slide. A Russian woman and victim of intimate partner violence who was also put under house arrest by her Nigerian husband from Anambra State. She was cut off from communicating with friends and family. Wakol assisted her to get her passport for her and her children, and they also ensured she was successfully repatriated back to Russia and reunited with her family. Wakol did this in collaboration with Project Alert, an organization based in Lagos that provided shelter before the woman and her children left. Next slide. This woman lives in Enugu. She was terribly battered by her spouse, who pulled her hair during an argument. Wakol waded in and provided medical and legal support. The perpetrator is currently undergoing trial in Enugu. Next slide. Next slide. Women's economic empowerment. We had seen some of it in the documentary. Next slide. You can see the equipment, oil processing factory of Wichita Women Association as above Valenzimo. Next slide. You can see the success story. Sunday, Rachel Chinelu, a wife-turned empowered entrepreneur through the Women's Western Leadership Project. From full-time housewife to a skilled confectioner, she now sweetens life for her family while fulfilling her own needs. Next slide. There's a piggery farm at Udi from this project. Next slide. You can see the soap making and the oil processing machine, palm oil processing. Next slide. Women's political participation and leadership. Next slide. So the results you can see, inclusion of women in traditional rulers council. You can see that in pictures. Many of the women are here too today. Next slide. Inclusion of women in West and North local government area. Next slide. This is a testimony from the personal secretary to His Royal Highness Igwe B. Eze of Ndabo. See his testimony clearly written here. He said, I want to be sincere to you. There are a lot of challenges we have seen before the inclusion of women in the cabinet that have been resolved. We were having stray animals and invasion by the herdsmen, and it was these women that controlled it. Since the local government is no longer taking care of the markets, the women go about sweeping and managing the markets. Next slide, please. Graduation from the Women's Leadership Academy of Wakol. Next slide. This is the first female president, Computer Science Department, IMT Enugu. Next education program. Next slide. This is the training because WINEX trained the women peer facilitators in the previous slide. These are women peer educators and members of the peer education circle from the communities where we work. Next slide. The letters of declaration, the proclamation by Igwe in the community of Amago and Kebo. Next slide. These are evidences for you to see that these things really happen. Interventions during COVID-19 pandemic, women were provided with some food items and face masks. Next item. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very good afternoon ovation. Very amazing. To work with Radio Nigeria.
I thought with all the achievements she listed, we would do better with our applause. Let's clap one more time for Mrs. Miriam Benkiti. She's a woman who's always had excellence as an imprint in all her activities.